Hello and welcome to this edition of the show. I'm your host, Brian Mallard. We got Tim Childry over there at the controls. And today our special guest is Mr. Jonathan Shuskey.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
Doing really good. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming. Great to have you on the show. Jonathan has some cool stuff, including the Johnny Buckets Show, which is a podcast that you should check out. But we're going to get into that. We're going to find out a little bit about this guy. So, Jonathan, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where were you born?
Thomasville, North Carolina is where I was born and raised, and spent the first 19 years of my life there before I decided to join the Army. And actually, my first stop in that process was right here in Columbus and Fort Benning, Georgia. So,
cool.
Yeah.
So, and you know what? I'm going to jump in at this point. I know Jonathan had mentioned that he is in the military currently.
Yes.
And, you know, tomorrow is Memorial Day. So it's a little crowded here in the studio, so I can't get to where I can. But, hey, I'm giving him a air fist bump.
There you go.
There you go.
That's
And say thank you for your service.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that.
Actually, thank you very much for your service.
Appreciate that.
And actually, if you want to get involved, the Q&A is open on Hangouts.
Yep.
So if you
And
want,
comments on YouTube.
and comments on YouTube.
And you can comment on Facebook.
Lots of avenues for you to get involved. So tell me a little bit about your parents. What did they do?
Well, my dad was a small business owner for most of my childhood, really for all of my childhood. He owned a heating, air conditioning, and refrigeration business. So it was a small time deal. He had 2 or 3 trucks that he had, and had a crew of about 4 or 5 guys that worked for him. And they were able to do, he did service calls, and they did installation, and even did some, larger residential type stuff, and did really well for himself. And he owned that business for about 33 years. Owned it right up until I'd say around 2004, 2005. During my first deployment to Afghanistan is actually when he sold the business, and kind of from that point, he just kind of did some small time stuff here or there, and just kind of hung out. But my mom really spent most of her time working with him and doing the receptionist type stuff. And so the family business, and we got to spend a lot of time together. He and I, during the summers, I'd go work for him, and crawling around under houses and getting dirty and hanging out with Dad. Those were good times. And we were both big basketball fans, so we'd spend all afternoon under a house putting in an air conditioning unit and talking about the game from yesterday or whatever. And that was probably the start of my sports debate, was sitting and working with Dad and talking about basketball games under a house somewhere. So
He got it honest.
yeah.
Now let's go a little bit into what made you join the military.
Honestly, when I got done with high school, I'm not going to lie to you. I wasn't an A student. It wasn't even a B student most of the time. And but I was fortunate enough to get to go to college, and I was going to go there. And my goal in life was to teach music. That's what I wanted to do.
Wow.
And I was really interested in music growing up, and that was my goal, was to teach music at some point. And I got away from home. And I was there in school for all of about 2 months before I realized that being that far away from home probably wasn't the best idea for 18-year-old Johnny Buckets. So I came back home very soon after going to college, because things were not going well. And I came back, and I worked with Dad for a little bit, found a couple of jobs here and there. And it was actually my dad that suggested joining the military. He had been in the military back in the early 70s. And he told me, he said, look, it'll be hard. He said, but they're going to give you 3 meals a day, and 3 hots and a cot is what he called it. And he said, they're going to take good care of you, and they're going to teach you a lot of stuff that maybe I necessarily didn't get to. Right. And he was right. And so I'll say my dad, he was probably the biggest factor in joining the Army.
Very cool. Now, you and your dad used to talk about basketball.
Yep.
So what led you to the artistic side of it, the broadcasty side, the Johnny Bucket side?
It's really interesting. During that first deployment in 2004, I was stationed in Hawaii at the time, and there was a group of us guys in that unit together that we were all sports fanatics, loved football, basketball. Our motto well, it was kind of my motto. It became our group motto was, if they're keeping score, we're going to watch. Because I mean, there were days that nothing else would be on, so we'd watch professional bowling. I mean, that's how desperate we were to watch sports. And so what we did during that first deployment, there's a show that comes on. It's on ESPN, one of the ESPN channels. It's called Around the Horn. And basically what it is, you've got a show host and you've got 4 writers or broadcasters from different parts of the country. And those guys come on and debate, and they're awarded points, or points are taken away, based on what their argument is. Right. And so we tried to recreate that show, even videoed it a little bit here or there when we had a chance. And it was really, really fun. And we'd start getting crowds of guys come and gather around and watch us sit and debate. And I know on the show on ESPN, they've got a mute button, and he can just mute a guy if the guy's not making any sense, or if the guy gets a little out of line or whatever. So we had the mute button and everything. And if the host hit the mute button, you had to stop talking right away. And it was really fun. But it was then we had guys that weren't really into sports at all, that would sit around and listen to us debate sports. And we started noticing that, at 3:00 in the morning, when the games finally came on over there, that these guys were starting to kind of creep into the TV room, where the one TV that we had, that we took that thing over on the weekends, and it was all sports all the time. But these guys were starting to creep in and watch games with us and stuff. And that's when it kind of hit me that I really did enjoy talking about and debating sports, and it was an avenue to get other people interested in sports. And I've always loved sports, and I want other people to get involved in it and like it too. There's a guy that's been listening to my podcast for the last few months, never watched basketball in his life. And he's messaged me more than a few times on Facebook or wherever to let me know. Just the other night, actually, watching the Oklahoma City and Golden State game. Hey man, I was really interested in that game, and I was watching the whole way through. And it's the guy that up until a few months ago had never watched basketball. He's just a football guy pretty much. And so it's cool for me to get people involved and get people to tune into another sport, or tune into sports, period. My wife has to now. Just that's not by choice, I don't think. But but I've even gotten her, popping stats off the top of her head every now and then now. Wow. So that's kind of the deal. That's where it started for me, was in Afghanistan, of all places.
Well, I've actually listened to a couple of his podcasts, and one of the things that gets me is Johnny actually takes the stats, and it's not just, don't think that if you listen to his podcast, it's just going to be a lot of stats. He actually takes that and brings it down to your level to make it interesting. And the stats come, at a later time.
Yeah, I'm not one of those. A lot of people that are involved in sports and sports talk and sports debate, there's a show that's actually on TV that's called Numbers Don't Lie, I think is the name of it. And they absolutely do sometimes. Like, sometimes those numbers can be so misleading. Yeah. So the stats are really good to look at from time to time, and they can tell you some of the story. But man, I don't like looking at a box score and then trying to base an opinion off that alone. There's a lot more that goes into it than that. So while the stats and the numbers and stuff are really important, the eye test, you've got to be able to sit down and watch it and see what's going on to put it with those numbers sometimes. And and I do try to. I'm not going to say I try to dumb it down, or I don't really know what the right terminology is for that, but
let's call it break it down.
Yeah, break it down. I do try to break it down. I'll use my wife as an example again. She asks me questions all the time, and this is somebody that, to put it bluntly, probably didn't watch any sports before she met me. So she asked me questions like constantly during games. And at first, I remember when we first got married, it would get to the point of annoying. Like, oh my God, how do you not know this? There's 3 outs in baseball, and 4 balls is a white. I'm having to explain this basic stuff, but that's when it kind of hit me that, like, look, man, not everybody knows this stuff. Not everybody's been watching sports all their lives. And so I do try to break things down as far as I can. Right. So if there is that person that's listening that maybe doesn't watch as often as, the rabid sports fans like me, that they understand what the heck I'm talking about.
So you watch a lot of sports?
Oh man. So from September to February, I guess, first week of February, you can find me in my man cave Saturdays and Sundays with a notepad, and 15, 20 games a weekend, most weekends, just trying to keep up.
Cool. Tell you what, let's go to a commercial. Tim dial one up, and we're going to come back and we're going to talk about his show, and we're going to look at some pictures and get some commentary.
Timeless beauty at the Gypsy Cherub, 3760 Woodruff Road, Columbus, Georgia. Class is back in style.
Hello, and welcome back to the show with Jonathan Shuskey. So let's talk a little bit about Johnny Buckets.
Yeah, the name Johnny Buckets was actually, I got that name from Bobby Z. He did the press box on 95.7 here in Columbus, and I was fortunate enough to do that show with him for about a year. I was the co-host, sidekick,
right,
whatever you want to call it, and that's where that was really the first time I'd ever done anything as far as sports talk or sports media or whatever. And so I came along right as the Deflategate story took off.
right.
And so once we worked our way through Deflategate, we found ourselves right in the middle of March Madness and in the NCAA tournament. And I told him that, you know, from day one when I walked through the door, I said, basketball is where it is for me. Like,
right.
I'm not like most of the people here in the Southeast that it's football or nothing. For me, it's basketball and then everything else.
Right.
And so in talking about the NCAA tournament and March Madness over the course of those few weeks, a few people had given me a couple of nicknames here and there. There was one caller that had referred to me as Johnny Bullets and using the Army stuff. And a couple of people had a couple other nicknames and some maybe not so favorable. But Bobby finally one day he decided on Johnny Buckets. And there are a couple of players. There was a kid that played at Creighton. His name was Doug McDermott, and they called him Dougie McBuckets. And so the buckets thing is kind of, you know, synonymous with basketball or whatever.
Gotcha.
And so he coined the Johnny Buckets nickname, and it kind of stuck. And what's weird is going on, you know, I've gone on a show here locally, Football Nightly down south, with my buddy Josh Payton. I've filled in on there a couple of times, and it's really weird to do an all football show with the name Johnny Buckets. It's but it is what it is. Like it's the name that's stuck for a little over a year now, and I enjoy it. My kids run around the house going, you know, we heard Johnny Buckets on the radio today, Dad.
Nice.
Like, well, thanks for listening, guys.
Your biggest fans?
Yeah.
Or littlest fans? Now, how did you get this off the ground? How did you start doing it?
What's that?
How did you get into like you were on the radio with you were the co-host, sidekick, and how did you go from that to the Johnny Bucket Show?
Well, starting the radio thing was honestly a lot easier than I thought it would be. I actually just sent Bobby a message on Facebook one day, and I was like, "Hey, man, I've been listening to your show for about a year. You know, basically since I moved here, and I mean, I'd just like to come in and chat with you one day and check out the studio and you know, see what's going on." And so I came in, and he actually ended up putting me on the air with him that day, and we sat there and did a 3-hour show.
Wow.
And we did that a couple of times over the next few weeks, and till finally he said, "Hey, come in and do this 5 days a week, man. Like, let's get you on the payroll up here, and let's start doing this." And that was really cool. So I did the show with him until the end of 2015, and I know he had talked about leaving and going back home and doing some other things, and so I decided to kind of branch out and try to go my own direction and try to figure some stuff out. So I decided to do the podcast. And I was kind of pinch hitting, doing the TV fill-ins and doing segments on another show here locally, the Tip and Thrift Show. They do a really good show on Tuesdays and Thursdays on the CSU 88.5. I just wanted to kind of branch out and start doing some other stuff. And so the podcast thing, I know anybody that's got a sports talk show has a podcast that goes along with it now, and there are the webcasts and all this different stuff. And I just wanted to go that route, try my own thing, try to give it my own twist, my own theme a little bit, and see how it goes. And it's going okay so far.
Well, that's great. Glad to hear that. Because, here at the show and me personally, I love seeing people do stuff. And even if it's something that I'm not particularly, in a screech to see, I'm just so stoked to see people doing stuff. So it's always a pleasure to hear that something's going well. Tim, understand we got some pictures we want to.
Yeah, we actually got. I just wanted to say too. First of all, just wanted to remind everyone they can go hear Johnny's show. It's on the lower third, but still, it's on HTTPS SoundCloud.com. Look for Johnny Bucket Show.
That's it.
And it was really cool. I actually was going to get him to show it, but he has a beautiful young daughter up here with him, but she is out. She is. I mean, she's smarter than the rest of us.
This is my wife told me this when I was doing live radio here in Columbus last year. She'd have the kids in the car and they'd be going somewhere, and she said the best way to get the kids to be quiet and go to sleep is turn you on. Listening to Dad talk about sports absolutely puts them out. So, but they're
Johnny was talking about the different places he had been and that he's going as far as the different stations and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And, even here we have not a studio, but a fairly decent sized room.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking before we went on, and I asked him, I said, Johnny, I've listened to your podcast. What do you record on? And I wish I could show you exactly what he recorded on. I mean, he took the bare minimum that he had and is making it work. It's absolutely amazing. And I would go get it, but I'm hooked up with a pair of earphones. Like I said, his young daughter is just out right now. I'm not going to bother her, so I'm going to let her enjoy her Sunday.
It's amazing what you can do with just a little bit of stuff. I've always preached on Facebook that you can do a lot with just a video camera and Windows Movie Maker.
Yeah, it doesn't take much. And what's really funny is going from a studio, going into a radio station and doing it in a studio and doing the call in, and you got the massive soundboard and all this stuff, and you're taking telephone calls, and you've got a producer in the room, and now I just do it on this.
Look at this, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, he has got the software that he showed me. He hooks up a microphone and he does a pot, and it sounds really good too.
Yeah, I just bought a microphone that was compatible with the iPhone and pressed record and started going.
Nah. Give me the name of that app.
It's what is the name of this thing? It's the Studio Mini.
Is
the name of the app.
I don't have an iPhone, so I have a Droid, so it's probably not available on that.
I think it is actually.
Oh, is it?
I think so.
Yeah, if they don't have one, I know iPhones, they have something for Android.
Right.
One with the other, but still, it's just amazing to me that he took his phone. He said, "Hey, I've got this interest. I've got this things that I know about. I'm going to do a podcast."
Mm-hmm. It's amazing what you can do with just and like the cameras on these things. I shoot little miniature movies for Instagram, and it's ultra high def.
Yep.
I mean, it's amazing what you can do.
So go to a couple of these pictures. I just got some general things. Now, actually, I want to show you guys. If you, I showed Johnny. He knows what's coming up. If you want to hear the really in-depth stuff, then I encourage you to go to his show because that's something that he's really going to go in depth that we really don't have the time here.
Right, exactly.
But the first picture we have, let me see if I can get this up.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, he's already referred to this one. But,
Deflategate. Yep. My take wasn't what most people's take was when this first started. I was absolutely on the side of Tom Brady, and I understood the situation. A lot of people, he told those ball boys to take air out of the footballs. I don't doubt that for a second. I do believe that he told them to do that. The NFL rule book says 12.5 to 13.5 pounds or whatever is the pounds per square inch that it's supposed to have.
Right.
So I think that they were probably at the top side of that, and he probably did tell them, hey, I want to bring it down to the lower end of that. I don't think he ever told them to do anything that was going to break the rules. Right. That was kind of where I always came from. And what's been really fun is from the time this started, January timeframe of 2015 to now, watching the public's perception of this thing really swing in the other, like a lot of people have come to the other side of this thing now, and they've read this report that the NFL spent $4 million on and didn't prove anything. And
exactly.
a lot of people have swung to that side. So
that stuff's still going on too. That's what's amazing to me.
The appeal is on. He's not going to serve that 4 games. I really don't think so.
Exactly. 4 games. And next one.
Oh, Freddie. Everybody's favorite scapegoat if they're an Atlanta Braves fan.
He got bad. He got done bad.
Look, I know a lot of people didn't like him as the manager even before the Braves were bad. But I got to tell you, the Braves are what they are right now. They're a rebuild project. They're not going to be good this year. They're not going to be good next year. They're just not. 2018 is probably what you're looking at. I don't understand why you don't just keep this guy around. Like, nobody wants this job. Nobody's dying. Nobody's knocking your door down to come and manage the Atlanta Braves right now. It didn't make much sense to me, but like I said, he's everybody's favorite scapegoat right now. They've actually won a few games since they got rid of him, and that honeymoon phase is going to wear off with the next guy, just like it did with him. And
it's going to bring up the AAA manager for the interim.
I was at band practice the other day, and some of the guys were talking about him, and I think I heard a mention of scapegoat. Like, so that's apparently, other people share your view on that.
He's taking the rap for a really bad front office. That's what he's doing.
That is, but you know what? If you really want to get to bad managers, for Freddie, we had to put this man up.
Oh, that's an old picture.
It is. I had to dig that one up. Ted did some really, really crazy things.
Yeah, he sure did. And I got to be honest with you, with the team that they've got in place right now, he'd be a perfect manager because I don't care who's managing that team. They're not going to be able to do a whole lot with it.
This is true. Next up, we're going to go to his expertise. We're going to go to basketball since this is the Atlanta area. What do you think about the Hawks this year?
I like the Hawks. I liked the Hawks a lot last year. I actually, going into the playoffs, I liked them more this year than I did last year going into the playoffs. I thought the second half of their season was a lot stronger this year. I'll tell you, I've been here for almost 3 years now, and when I first moved here, you'd have had a hard time convincing me that the Atlanta Hawks would become the talk of the town in Atlanta over the Braves and over the Falcons.
You got that right.
But they really have, and we were talking before the show about the Falcons getting a new stadium next year and the Braves moving into a new stadium next year. I think it's just a matter of time before these guys move out of Phillips or at least get some massive upgrades to Phillips before it's all said and done. But the Hawks are going in the right direction. This new ownership group, Mike Budenholzer's done a great job coaching this team. And it'll be interesting to see what they do in free agency this year. The market in Atlanta, it's not a big market. Not a normal big market like a New York or a Los Angeles or even a Miami, which is kind of a destination type place. And it's not going to be a Golden State or a San Antonio where you've got, a winning tradition kind of built there or whatever. They're really in a weird spot, in an in-between place. And some of that's because of the fan base is really unique in Atlanta. A lot of the folks that are in Atlanta weren't born and raised here. There are a lot of people that are kind of import into the area. And so they're in a tough spot when it comes to free agency. It'll be really interesting to see what they do. They're a really good team that lacks one true superstar. And so it'll be interesting to see how they attack free agency, what they do in the draft, and we'll see. But I think things look really good for Atlanta as it stands right now for the Hawks.
Cool.
Okay. Not that it's the most aesthetically pleasing thing to look at. I told Johnny that earlier, but what's your thoughts?
That's the spaceship from the new Independence Day movie, right?
There you go. It does resemble that. You're right.
No, look, this is one of the best things to happen to Atlanta in quite a while. The Falcons getting this new stadium is going to be a really big deal. They just announced earlier this week or last week, I think it was, that Atlanta is going to get the Super Bowl. They're going to host it in 2019, I think. They're going to get a lot of really big deals. They're going to host a lot of championship games. They're going to host Final Fours. That's what the NCAA and the NFL and the NBA and that's what they're looking for. They're looking for these big billion-dollar stadiums where they can pack, 80,000 people in there.
1.4 billion, I believe.
Yeah.
was like the end of it.
So this is a big deal. What it's going to do for the economy in Atlanta, it's going to generate a lot of money there. The amount of folks that are going to come in to watch these events there. And, it's kind of part of keeping up with the Joneses too. In the NFL, just like any other sport, the Braves are doing the same thing. Stadium, the life of a stadium isn't what it used to be. Not everybody has Wrigley Field or Fenway Park or places like that. And so now, the life of a stadium is 15, maybe 20 years. And then it's time to upgrade and build a bigger and better one to keep up with what everybody else is doing. Look in Jacksonville. They got the poolside stuff and cabanas and all this crazy stuff going on. So you've got to do that. You've got to keep up with the Joneses, keep the facilities up, because that drives a lot of the free agency stuff, trying to get guys to come and play for your team.
Right.
A lot of that's based around, hey, what do your facilities look like? What's your stadium like? And so it's a big deal for Atlanta. And I think it's a really good deal for them. I think it's going to be good for the city.
And if they're going to have the Super Bowl, then they have to really up the ante.
Yeah, it's true. You're not going to host the Super Bowl without a certain amount of infrastructure, and then obviously not without a state-of-the-art stadium.
Yeah.
So,
and I downloaded this picture, and the day after I downloaded this, there was the announcement that they were going to get that Super Bowl, and they beat out a market of New Orleans simply because of this stadium.
Yeah.
The one big issue that I've got, the one thing that I worry about for Atlanta hosting a big game like this, is anybody that's ever driven through there knows what the traffic's like. So I wonder what they're going to do as far as the roads and stuff down there between now and when they get that Super Bowl. They've got to do something, because it's a mess.
It's not the best on the best days.
Okay, next, for all you college fans, SEC, what's your predictions? What do you think about them? Georgia, Florida,
I'll say this. Doing the live call-in show, doing the press box with Bobby Z, I developed a little bit of a love-hate relationship with some SEC fans and some of the callers on the show. We butted heads all the time, and that a lot of that's because I'm a Michigan fan, and
I just found this out too, guys.
Yeah. And so we did. We were butting heads a lot on the show, and I think a lot of it came from, I don't have a dog in the fight when it comes to the SEC, so I could just I could watch the games and give it to them straight.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of Georgia and Auburn fans weren't really too high on Johnny Buckets when he was doing that show, and maybe still aren't. But look, it's hard for me to bet against Alabama and Nick Saban. And if you've bet against them in the last 10 years, you've probably lost money. The guy's won 4 national championships in his last 7 years there, and they're not going anywhere. I mean, the number 1 recruiting class for 6-7 years running now. So it's really hard for me to bet against Alabama. In the SEC East, I think it's a 3-dog race between Tennessee, Florida, and Georgia. Georgia with a first-year head coach in Kirby Smart. And, I know Kirby Smart comes with a pretty good resume, being the defensive coordinator there at Alabama and kind of working under Nick Saban for as long as he did. But it's hard to tell with first-year head coaches. When you're the guy that's responsible for everything that's going on within that program, it's hard to tell how guys respond to that. At Florida, there's still work to be done there, and you could see that at the end of last year. As good of a season as they had last year, they go to the SEC championship and get dominated by Alabama, and then my Wolverines mopped them up pretty good down in Florida in a bowl game.
He's smiling, guys.
So yeah, there's still some work to be done there. But the team that I think is in the best shape in the SEC East is probably Tennessee. Tennessee is a team that last year, I think they lost 5 games by a total of 27 points. So they didn't. That's a team that had Alabama on the ropes with 2 or 3 minutes to go in a game. So they're a really talented team, and I think they're going places. I think they'll win the SEC East. You'll probably see them in Alabama play for the SEC title. That's my early prediction anyway.
Okay, well, I got the next one simply because, in this part of the country, this is almost as big as the game for some people, but the tailgate party.
The tailgate, man. I was never a really big tailgater, to be honest with you. I know when my dad and I would go to games, it was try to get there and find a place to park, get inside, and, try to time it where the game was going to start pretty soon after that.
Right.
It wasn't until I was stationed in Hawaii, and if you're stationed in Hawaii, you go to the Pro Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And I was stationed there for a little over 8 years, so I went to a bunch of Pro Bowls. And if you go to the Pro Bowl, you're going to tailgate. And, man, that Hawaiian barbecue and all the different stuff they do out there. So I got really involved in the tailgating stuff while I was stationed out there. I didn't know what I was missing for all those years.
Can't go wrong with barbecue.
No way.
And, the next one, I told Johnny, I said, I actually just like this picture.
Yeah, there you go.
This really has nothing to do with the show, but we like it anyway.
Oh, my goodness. And last but not least.
Oh, there's that guy.
Oh,
there's that guy.
Yeah.
Johnny doing his thing. And this is down at the CSU?
Yeah, 88.5 WCUG. A really, really cool studio and everything they've got down there, thanks to the folks at P&B. I know they just did the kind of the grand opening stuff a few weeks ago, and I've been fortunate enough to go on and do the show with Tip and Thrift. They have me on there usually every Tuesday. I go on and do a segment with those guys, and we have a lot of fun. Those guys are 21, 22 years old.
Oh yeah,
and I'm 34, so I'm the old man in that group.
Right.
Where when I was doing the press box and doing that stuff with Bobby Z, I was the young guy in that crowd. A lot of older guys around here interested in their football. So it's really cool to kind of be the old guy in a group, and those guys are fun to talk to. I like having those guys on the podcast and doing their show, and but yeah, really good studio they've got over there.
We are going to go to a commercial, and we'll be right back with some more important and cool stuff from Johnny Buckets.
Hello, I'm Catherine Childry with Let's Vocalize. For over 35 years, I've coached vocalists and groups privately. I also perform vocal workshops training choirs. I'd love the opportunity to show you how direction, discipline, vocal health care, and regular practice can drastically improve you, your group, or your choir's performance. Call me at 706-536-6123 or visit us online at www.letsvocalize.com. I'd love to help you offer your best gift.
Hello and welcome back to the show. Special guest Jonathan Shuskey. So this is a section where we ask some questions, like one of which is, where would you like to take the show, your show?
The goal is to do live radio, to do a call-in show. And I think one of the things that I didn't think about before I decided to go from doing the live call-in show to doing a podcast is how much I was going to miss the interaction with listeners.
Right.
And there's still ways to interact with listeners. I get, Facebook questions and comments and stuff all the time, but there's something really fun about, throwing a take out there and then having 5 guys lined up to talk to you about it on the phone.
Yeah.
And it really keeps you on your toes when you've got, constant people calling in with different takes on stuff. And it's really fun doing the live call-in stuff. So that's the goal, is to be back doing the live show with, the call-ins. And I don't know how to describe, like, it's if you're a guy that does sports talk and you're into debate and whatever, that's like, it gives you a little bit of a high almost.
Yeah.
Sitting and talking to folks. And like I said, being quick on your feet with the Deflategate thing, I got killed. I mean, for the months that we talked about that, I was getting killed by everybody that called in. And so being able to constantly come back and try to throw a rebuttal out there for everything they were throwing at me, it was equal parts exhausting and entertaining, and it was really fun. So that's the goal, though, is to get back to doing that.
Well, it's like like as a musician, you record in the studio or you have a live show, and the live show is always more fun.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, we have people out there that, hopefully we have people out there that would like to do things. You do things, we do things. What advice would you give to people aspiring to do things like maybe a podcast or a show or anything?
I think a lot of people, when it comes to stuff like, doing a webcast, a podcast, whatever it may be, a lot of people get tied up in, oh, well, how time consuming is it? Or even more, how much money is it going to consume to get, and it's really not, it's not as outrageous as you think to get started and to kind of get your feet wet. Man, with all the technology that we've got today, like I showed you, I do mine on an iPhone, and that's essentially what I use to record my show. And I've got a program on a laptop that I use to edit stuff and to piece everything together and put the production together. And this whole thing has probably cost me $300 to do the podcast that I've done for a little over 5 months now. So I would say to a lot of folks, just stop making excuses. Is really where it starts. If you want to go do something, man, the technology, it's really a lot easier to get started on this stuff than you think it is. Just on Facebook, man, just use the live video stuff.
I have that now.
Just if that's what you want to do, then go that route and get started that way. But yeah, just don't make excuses. If you want to go do something and you've got a dream or whatever it is that you want to achieve and try to get after, then go get after it.
And like people tell me when I post something on Facebook of a political nature, Google is your friend. So you can find how to set this stuff up and get started with it.
Well, I know that Johnny is also pretty well political sometimes, or he may comment.
I have to be really careful about how I comment about that stuff, being active duty.
Yeah.
But nobody's ever accused me of not having an opinion about something. So,
and I'm sure it's out there right now, but he was telling us right before he went on, he's keeping his watch on this different, things that are going on.
Right.
And he was just telling us they had a rookie?
A rookie driver wins the Indy 500.
That's right.
While running out of gas at the finish. It's unbelievable. It's yet another reason why I love watching sports, man.
See, it is. Like, I'm not a sports fan, and that was awesome to me.
Yep.
That was really cool because a rookie wins the Indianapolis 500 while running out of gas.
Alexander Rossi, California kid. What's really funny is when I first saw this, I'm checking through Twitter and there was some outrage. Like, oh man, another foreigner. And I'm like, no, this guy's from California. Like, calm down. And like nobody knows who he is. That's the problem for him. So
some people consider California a foreign country.
Well, and the last thing that I have to say for today, it's actually when we were speaking earlier and Johnny, commenting, hey, don't make excuses as far as if you want to do something. He was telling us about, what he would like to see for himself in the future. And to use an old adage, he's trying to skate to where the puck is going, not where the puck is at.
Right.
And, to go to either place, you're going to have to start somewhere.
You got to start somewhere. And, I do a lot of stuff, audio visual stuff. And you start off simple. Start off video camera, Windows Movie Maker, and now the video camera is right in your phone. You carry it with you everywhere. It's not, you don't even have to remember to take it with you because you're going to. Well, Jonathan Shuskey, I appreciate you coming on the show, man.
Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
And once again, happy Memorial Day.
Thank you very much.
And we'll pass happy Memorial Day to his young daughter, who is just. Well, she loved this recliner back here. She just absolutely was out like a light.
Sounds like a log truck in the background.
Oh, really? I can't hear. I've got on earphones, guys. So, but hey, she's enjoying herself. That's all that matters.
Yeah. Hope you've enjoyed this edition of the show with Johnny Buckets. Go and check out his podcast. And I'm your host, Brian Meller. And until next time, rock on.